How much do the all-new Christmas Brainrots of Santa's fuse generate with all the mutations? Starting with the new Abini Santanini, which goes from 11 per second to 719 per second with all the mutations. The Frogo ELFO, which goes from 67 per second to 4.3 thousand per second with all the mutations. The Penguin Tree, which goes from 270 per second to 17.6 thousand per second with all the mutations. The Choco Bunny, which goes from 1.4 thousand per second to 91.5 thousand per second with all the mutations. The Silo Regalo, which goes from 1.8 thousand per second to 119.3 thousand per second with all the mutations. The Jingle Sahur, which goes from 12.2 thousand per second to 800.8 thousand per second with all the mutations. The Tree Sahur, which goes from 17,000 per second to 1.1 million per second with all the mutations. The Yeti Claus, which goes from 257.5 thousand per second to 16.8 million per second with all the mutations. The Ginger Globo, which goes from 257.5 thousand per second to 16.8 million per second with all the mutations. The Ginger Cisterna, which goes from 293.5 thousand per second to 19.1 million per second with all the mutations. The La Vaca Present, which goes from 600,000 per second to 39.2 million per second with all the mutations. The Reindeer Trolala, which goes from 600,000 per second to 39.2 million per second with all the mutations. The Santio, which goes from 800,000 per second to 52.3 million per second with all the mutations. The Please My Present, which goes from 1.3 million per second to 84.9 million per second with all the mutations. The List Sahur, which goes from 2 million per second to 130.7 million per second with all the mutations. The Ho Sahur, which goes from 3.2 million per second to 212.4 million per second with all the mutations. The Chicletera Noeltera, which goes from 15 million per second to 980.6 million per second with all the mutations. And La Jolly Grande, which goes from 30 million per second to 1.9 billion per second with all the mutations. Subscribe to my channel if you want these brainrots.